Return, O virgin daughter of Israel, to these your highways by which you went. Welcome to Reunion Roadmap, a place to discover the people and communities along the highway of restoration for Israel's house of Joseph. Reunion Roadmap is a B'nai Yosef North America production. Be our guest for the next hour as we meet the people of the emerging house of Joseph here in North America. Hello, this is Fanny Pappas with B'nai Yosef North America, and with me is Al McCarn, our Executive Director. And we're going to Centralia, Washington, to interview Mark Randall. And this is an amazing interview. This first part that you're going to listen to, he's going into the beginning details of his life when he was younger. And I just would encourage all of you to stick with this. It's 6 parts, so stick with it because you're going to be totally blessed by this whole message.
Stefania, you're right. It is a tremendous blessing. Now, when I was interviewing Mark, I hardly knew that an hour and 45 minutes had gone by. This is by far the longest interview we've had. We are going to broadcast it in 6 parts over the next 6 shows. And why is it so important? Well, see, Mark's testimony is one of being pursued by God. As you will hear from this very first segment, from the age of 5, even younger than that, he had one kind of adversarial thing after another, as in 3 strikes against him with his family situation, being brought up in institutions in the state of Washington, a life of crime. The way that God intervened in his life, even when he didn't even know that there was a God who could intervene, it is amazing to hear. It is a blessing to hear, and it's humbling to hear. Now, our connection to Mark, he is our webmaster for B'nai Yosef North America. And let me just give you his website, Web Design by Mark. webdesignbymark.com. Take a look and check it out. He has done wondrous work for us at BINA on our website. And so his technical skills are awesome. But what is even more awesome is his heart for our Father, his heart for God's people, and the way he appreciates and walks out the redemption that he has received. Now, Mark lives in Centralia, Washington. As you'll hear, he's a native of Washington State, grew up in Washington and Oregon. And we think of the Pacific Northwest as a wonderful, beautiful place, which it is. But what Mark saw is a totally different side of that. A lot of it was inside the walls of reform institutions, prisons, and jails. Now, what happens when someone like that is pursued by God and redeemed? Well, that's what we're going to hear. And as you will also hear over this 6-part interview, this is not a thing that happened overnight. This is a thing that took decades to accomplish. And that seems to be more the norm, that God will work with us throughout our lives as we are yielding to him. So without further comment, let's go on up to Centralia, Washington, and meet Mark Randall. Here we are at another interview segment of Reunion Roadmap, and this time around, we get to go to Centralia, Washington, to meet Mark Randall, a man who has been instrumental in revitalizing BINA's website over the last few months. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Al. Good to be here.
I would encourage everyone to, if you haven't gone to our website at b'naiosefna.com, go and see what Mark's been doing. His handiwork is fantastic. We can actually navigate the site now. Things don't come to a crashing halt. And it's easy to upload. And as for the maintaining, well, I assume it's easier to maintain now that you have got things to where you want them. So first of all, thank you for that. And second of all, on behalf of all your many clients worldwide, thank you, because you're doing some necessary services that we all need.
Yeah, very welcome.
Now, folks, I have asked Mark to come on the show and just tell us his story, because as Mark, as you were relating it to me in our past conversations, this is like, it reminds me of Job in many ways, and others who have walked through some deep darkness, and yet the hand of the Lord is never far away. Redemption comes, blessing comes, glory to his name comes. So I'm just going to ask if you would share what you'd like with us, and I'll be quiet.
All right. Well, yeah, unlike Job, sometimes some of our turmoil is self-inflicted. Of course, I don't know that some of Job's was neither, but I for the most part, yeah, I wouldn't consider myself a biblical character in that realm. But my life has been an interesting life, and one that testifies to without a doubt, especially if people know me, testifies to the greatness and the goodness and the kindness and the mercy of the God that we serve. I guess, in saying how to give a testimony, I got to start from the beginning, because you can't really pull out the middle of it. You can, but it becomes, there's no context, as we've learned. Studying even scripture, you got to have context.
Oh, yes.
So I was born here in Washington, in Aberdeen, Washington, and my dad was a logger. I come from a family of dysfunction, and that would be an understatement, I guess. My dad was, like I said, a logger, and the typical logger from the 50s and 60s, violent, alcoholic, tough. It's a hard job, very hard job. Yeah, he was, what I learned later in life, probably the king of narcissists. And I never really realized that. But he had a traumatic childhood as well, which I'm not really privy to. His father's name was, I never even knew his dad's name. Well, until I was in my 20s. He'd never been mentioned. So that should tell you a little bit about how bad it was for him. But yeah, growing up with him, so he met my mom. They in high school. They went to school in Montesano together. They were high school sweethearts, and my dad was a track star and just a all around fun guy to be around, I think. And my mom fell for him, and it was a roller coaster ride for her. They didn't last very long. They divorced when I was very young. I think I was 2. And my dad, like most narcissists, don't like it when you make them pay, or when you make them face consequences. So the divorce was a consequence my dad wasn't willing to accept, so he terrorized my mother, and I was the tool for that. So yeah, it was pretty hard. So anyway, he took her to court, proved her unfit, and got custody of me at a very young age. I think I was 5. I remember when he came to get me from my grandma's. It was a traumatic event. And so became life with my dad. It was that way. I mean, terrible whoopings with the belt, and just, basically to shut up and not be heard from. And I had a lot of issues. And I was, in school, I was terrible. I stole the lunch money and jewelry from my stepmom, and because he remarried, and she was a good friend to me, but unfortunately she was my dad's wife as well. And so yeah, I had some problems in school, lying, stealing, petty stuff, but all pretty indicative of what I know now to be just a direct result of trauma and abuse, looking for attention, and take it any way you can get it, right? Whether it's good or bad. Yeah, he didn't put up with that very well. I mean, discipline was pretty strict. I could probably do 100 push-ups without even batting an eye when I was 6. And Yeah, just, I guess he got to the point where he just didn't want to deal with me anymore. So at 7 years old, he started threatening to get rid of me. Um, tell me he would just, give me to the state. And back then you could do that. In this state, they had it's called incorrigibility laws. And if you didn't want to deal with your kids, especially if they were a problem, you just give them up to the state. And he tried that. I remember he tried it when I was 8 first. And they didn't have room. Matter of fact, I went out and sat on the porch. He made me go out and sit on the porch while he went and called the receiving center. And then he came out and told me, he says, "You're lucky they don't have room," right? So I was okay for a while. But anyway, he was successful in that. When I was 10 years old, he gave me up to the state. And that was terrible. I mean, I didn't know, I didn't understand things, didn't understand where I was, why I was there, why everybody just left me. Nobody visited, no visits, no letters, no contact. And of course, all the rest of my family had pretty well cut off relationship with my dad. When my mom inquired about me, his response was always that I was at a friend's house, I wasn't home. So she didn't actually know for over a year that I was in an institution. I was in Echo Glen here in Washington State. And when she found out, by the time she found out, I was a wreck. I mean, I was angry, I was confused, and I just wanted to make all adults pay. That's just the way I felt. I just hated every adult. And I was just terror. I wasn't really a violent person, but I was just a terror. I just caused all the trouble I could possibly cause. And when mom found out, I guess she had been working with my counselor there at Echo Glen before she came up and actually visited me the first time, because the counselor knew that I was, going to have some real problems with her. Anyway, so yeah, she came up to start visiting me, and then was going to take me home. And that was a problem for me, because actually what I had found is that being in institutions was better than being at home, and I didn't want to leave. We got to do a lot of activities. We had a lake there at Echo Glen, so we built rafts and fishing, went camping, went hiking. I was like, no, I ain't going home. I don't want to go home. So I ran away from the institution, hoping that that would get me in trouble. And so that was the start. So I ran away. I came home. My mom wasn't prepared to deal with me. She had no idea how rebellious I'd become, and obstinate would be an understatement. And so yeah, that didn't last very long, and it ended up really ugly. And so I ended up going back to the institution. They took me back. She couldn't handle me. When I went and talked to my probation officer one time, she had already told the probation officer I had to go. She was scared of me. And so when I got there, the cops were waiting for me, and that didn't really help my frame of mind. So it then just kept consistently started, getting worse. So anyway, I ran away constantly. I learned that I could be out of the institution if I kept running. So I did. I ran. And back then in the days, those days in the 70s, juvenile institutions weren't a pleasure either. Discipline there was very harsh, and we didn't have any advocates like we have today for anything. So they just take you out back and deal with you. And isolation cells, the holes, what they called them. This discipline was terrible. You did what they said or else. I mean, that was the way it went. So, and I bounced from one institution to the other, and from one escape to the next. And I became known as a problem, just a problem in the system. I wasn't gonna, I did not care about submitting. That was not happening. I'm not gonna submit. So, and it kind of transitioned from there. So by the time I was 17 years old, I was starting to realize how really messed up my life was. I mean, I had 36 felonies at 17 years old, and most of them I had never been to court on. The way the juvenile system was is they didn't need to take it to court, actually. The probation officer just, so every time they sent me back to an institution, they would have a reason for it, whether it was, you broke into this house. Well, there was no court. It's just burglary is the charge, and That goes on the record. So I had this long record and only been to court a couple times. And not that I hadn't done these things. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I did, but there was, it was an odd system that wasn't very just or fair. But so by the time I was 17, I'd been in every juvenile institution in the state, and that was a lot. I don't know, dozens, and none of them wanted me back. No, none of them would take me. So I had a run in with my mom at 17 and broke into a bunch of apartments, assaulted a bunch of people, and it was on a New Year's. So I was drunk and messed up and just out of control, and committed an enormous amount of burglaries in the apartment complex that she lived in, stashed everything in her house. It was, yeah, terrible. So anyway, the judge had enough. They'd had enough, and no institution would take me back. So they remanded me to adult status. They made me an adult at 17 years old, sent me to the Yakima County Jail, which was my first dose of adult incarceration. And being young, I was a young kid. I wasn't big. Long hair was the thing in the 70s. And yeah, I wasn't very big. So it was a problem. Men in jail situations like that are not very pleasant. So they kept me separate from the main population for a while until I turned 18, and then they put me in in the main cell and main tank, and that was just that was terrible. So, and then so they had charged me with a bunch of burglaries and stuff, and they ended up sending me to Shelton, which is the beginning of the correction center here, prisons in Washington State. And then it's a diagnostic center where they tested you and decided which institution, which prison they were going to send you to, which facility. And then they had a population side of that too. So for younger people, instead of sending them to the major prisons. So they decided that was the best place for me. The guards in the prison system were not a joy either. You don't do what they say, well, they just put you down. So that was the problem. Anyway, I decided after I got beat up the first time by the guards there that I was not going to stay there. And since I was a master of escaping, I figured I could get out of there. I knew they had guns in the guard towers at the prison, though, right? And we planned it for quite some time. We waited until it was foggy, because we are notorious for our fog here. We called it parole dust in the prisons, because you can walk around and not be seen. So we decided to wait for the day, and we waited for the day. The day that came it was so foggy you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So we went down. We had purchased some wire cutters. We cut the fence between two guard towers, and we'd made to the first fence and was cutting on the second fence when we heard the patrol jeep coming. So we ran back to the lodge to wait for it to go through. And there was a guy over time that people had found out we were doing. He wanted to go with us. And we told him no. Well, he didn't take too kindly to that, so he ended up ratting us out. So when we went back to the hall, the guards came in, they apprehended us, threw us in our cells, and I ended up getting beat up again. My punishment for that was 14 months in the hole. That's an enormous amount of time in isolation cell. That was hard. That was really hard. Yeah, I got out once a week for an hour into a fenced-in yard. But other than that, I was in a 4x8 box.
Wow.
14 months.
If I could break in here, Mark, for just a minute. I had opportunity years ago to visit the Army's disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth. Mm-hmm. And the system they described there, I'm sure you're very familiar with similar things. Mm-hmm. But and they told us about the isolation cells. Mm-hmm. There, at least, the inmates were allowed out for 30 minutes a day, but you're saying an hour a week. And at this point, you're 18.
I was 18 years old. Mm-hmm. Yep, just turned 18. And they don't. So they were actually supposed to give you an hour a day. That's the law. but that didn't happen.
Okay, and that gets to another aspect of the penal system in the United States. It doesn't matter what state or territory you're talking about. What's on the books is one thing. What actually happens that may not get to a judge or to anyone else is another.
Mm-hmm.
And this I've heard from people on both sides, law enforcement friends and others like yourself who've spent some time.
Well, things aren't like that no more.
Mm.
We're talking about the 70s.
Yeah.
It was the late 70s. And yeah, it was not a fun place to be. They didn't care about laws or lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What's on the books is once you're in the system and you lost your rights like that, you really had no rights. So to be fair, I'm not opposed to that hard of a system. I think that it should not be a fun experience.
Right.
If you go that route, if that's where you're at, I've always felt that way.
Here is Teshuvah with Coastlands from Return, available at teshuvahmusic.com.
From the ends of the earth, he frees them from captivity, redeems them on the earth. The blind, the lame, the woman in pain, he brings them back, to the coastlands. Here's the message to the nations. Here's the message. He who scattered them is gonna gather them again from the nations, where his hand has scattered them like a shepherd. His hands will lead them in from the nations, from our coastlands. The path is paved with tears they walk on, they're begging God to come. He opens wide his arms for them, by streams he leads them on. These are his sheep, father to Israel, and he calls Ephraim his firstborn son. To the coastlands, here's the message to the nations. Here's the message. He who scattered them is gonna gather them again from the nations, where his hand has scattered them like a shepherd. His hands will lead them in from the nations, from our coastlands. He who gonna gather them again.
Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the mid-rush portion of Reunion Roadmap. This is David Jones. With me today is Barry Phillips. Shalom, brother.
Shalom, David.
You know, I recently was looking through the book of Exodus, and also known as Shemot in Hebrew, and I stopped at something that really caught my attention, and I figured it would be good for us to kind of share and to talk about a little bit today. I stopped in Exodus 10, and if you know the story, and if you don't know the story, go back and read it. But if you don't know the story, Moses and Aaron, they go in before Pharaoh a few times by now, by the time you get to Exodus 10. And again, so let my people go. And he says, nope. And then there's something happens on a national scale. And then he says, well, maybe I should let you go. And then they're like, okay, we're going to go. And nope. All this back and forth and back and forth. So when we get to this point, in Exodus 10, looking at verse 8 and 9, Moses and Aaron, they go back into Pharaoh, and he says to them, okay, fine. Yes, I am paraphrasing. Okay, fine. Go serve Yahweh your God. But who's going to go with you? Who's going to go? So yeah, go serve, but who do you want to go? And Moses responds with, we will go with our young, with our old, we'll go with our sons and our daughters, we'll go with our flocks and our herds, for we must hold a feast to Yahweh. And what Pharaoh responds with is basically, okay, the men can go, but no, you got to leave your families here. You got to leave the livestock here. You can't take anything with you. You just want to go off and into the wilderness and serve your God. So go do that, and then come back to your families. And Moses, his response was, no, we are all going to serve Yahweh. And there's a lot here that we can look at. I mean, one, think about the Shema, for an example. The importance of that is, and you shall teach it to your children, and over and over and over again, even in the Exodus story. So when your children say to you, what does this mean? You are constantly doing things to reinforce to your children Yahweh, his Torah, his heart, his principles, his Ruach, everything in our life. But there is something that if we don't stop for a second, we can overlook very, very easily. And we all want to hooray on this idea of Pharaoh, let the people go. So that, yes, and he redeemed them, brought them out of their oppression, freed them, and this is awesome, this is great. But he did this on a national level. Yes, each individual was set free, each individual was there to come out, but yet he did this on a national level for an entirety of a people called Israel. When they came out, like Moses said, they came out with their entire families. And not just their family, not just one little family. They came out as a grouping of tribes, a grouping of families called tribes, and a grouping of tribes called Israel.
Right.
And so when they do this, they came out at that point, and they brought livestock with them, which would have been a livelihood for them. It would have been a business essentially, as well as could have been a great food source for them too. So what the idea I get from this is, when we come out to worship Yahweh, when Yahweh redeems us, a lot of people like to look at the world and the systems of it as like a Pharaoh kind of thing, right? Well, when Yahweh redeems us, he redeems us to come out of that and to come into worship him. But it's not just me. It's me, it's my family, it's my household, it's my business, it's everything that I own, everything that I have. The entirety of who I am is part of a people called Israel, who Yahweh has redeemed and brought me to himself out in the wilderness to show how to walk in his ways, how to have his heart and to walk in that. So that's my goodness, it's probably almost 5 minutes coming in, just kind of trying to set this up, but
good preaching, brother. Good preaching.
Yeah, kind of on a roll. But the idea here is we've got to be careful not to get into a very easily slip into like an American mindset mentality where it's all about you. You know, I mean, we often hear, if it was just you, he would have came and gave his life and resurrected. If it was just you. And I do agree with that. If it was just for one person and he loves us, he would do that. But we get stuck in that type of mentality. It's not just you though. And it is about a people that he has called and set apart by his name. So are we willing to say, he is my God, he is my King, he is my Savior, and I worship him? Oh, and I'm part of a family.
The text in the book of Yehoshua that is often quoted, Joshua Aaron sings about, as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh. That is, you use the idea about being an American, the rugged individual, independent person. That's our culture. That's the way we've been trained. A man needs to be able to stand on his own 2 feet. And we quote that verse, and in doing so, we kind of get this mindset of being defiant a bit. You know, me and my house, we're going to serve him. You figure out what you're going to do. So it's a me and mine, we don't know about you mindset. I think when Yahushua said those words, to a degree, it was to the shame of the rest of the nation. And that is, idealistically, what Yah wants is corporate cooperation and corporate covenant walk together. But you are espousing ideals that are against that. Well, we're saying to you, even if you disobey, we're going to obey. The purpose, I think, of that was, you need to get yourself rightly aligned. Come stand with me. And of course, you know, it says, the people said, no, but we will worship Yah as you're saying. Well, it lasted throughout the life of Yehoshua, but afterwards they began their downward spiral, which was a downward spiral revival process over and again. As you were talking earlier, David, what came to mind is 2 additional things. One, when Moshe said, we're taking everyone and everything with us, Pharaoh was bargaining to get them to leave something behind that they would want to return for. These men are not going to go out into the wilderness, sacrifice to this Elohim of theirs, and then not return if their wives and children are still here. They will have to come back for their families. So he was looking for some reasonable rope to tie them to Mitzrayim so they could only go so far. Whatever in our lives we exclude from inclusion in our worship, whatever part of us individually, whatever part of us as an aspect of our lives, our jobs, our family, our reputation, etc., whatever we withhold from our worship is that which will tie us to this present world system. Worship should vitally, righteously connect us, Creator, to the point that we empty ourselves of ourselves and become fully Him. That's the ultimate goal of worship. Now, I will confess that doesn't always happen. Things get in the way or we get in the way. But idealistically, that's what we want to have. When we withhold any part of our person or our lives from that aspect, then we remain tied to the world. The other side of that is the world doesn't understand the commitment level that we need to worship. You know, otherwise we're looked at radical, fanatical, religious people. No one should be expected to make that kind of commitment. That's taking things too far, etc. So Pharaoh and his present world will wrinkle their brow, not agree with us at what we say is required for us to fully worship. But ultimately, behind the scenes, it's like if they reach the level of commitment that they're talking about, then they become separate from us. We're no longer able to influence them, and we've lost some desired element of our society, and we don't trust what we don't control.
That's good, and that's very true. If we don't have control over it, we have a hard time putting any kind of trust in that, because we don't know where it's going. We don't control it. But yet there are some things in our life that are beyond our control that we really can't do anything about. I mean, example is if you fly anywhere. If you're not the pilot, that's completely out of your control. That takes a level of trust. And to go along with what you were saying about the ways of the world and Pharaoh, you can continue to see this in the bargaining that goes back and forth in here, because you could look at it this way. He tells Moses and Aaron, okay, go worship your God, but this is how you're going to do it. So go worship your God, but you're going to do it the way I tell you. You're going to do it the way that I say, a way that I feel is acceptable to me. And so you have a worldly king trying to dictate worship to a holy God that he doesn't know and doesn't serve, and say, this is how you're going to serve them because that's what I want you to do. And it's funny, because if we're looking at the world to do the same thing, and the world around us, there are many people who are trying to say, it's okay for you to worship your God, just don't do it the way that I don't like.
Well, the government says you can worship, but you have to be situated like this physically in your audience, and you can only have a percentage there, and you have to meet in the parking lot. No, you can't even meet in the parking lot. Just do everything virtually. Well, not all congregations are set up with technology. Unfortunately, we're seeing some church congregations that are older, maybe less technically astute. They're going to dry up because people have been rendered it with such fear that they won't attend, but they can't vitally connect. What do? They're going to fall apart. Well, those are old folks anyway. It really doesn't matter. It does matter. These are our elders. As B'nai Yosef, we're learning the value of our elders. We're not talking just about this seated body of couples that function in that, but we're talking about those that have fought the battles before us, prayed the doors open that we're now walking through, and have laid a foundation for us to stand on. Pharaoh's system is finding ways to marginalize or even dissolve them altogether. What's the corporate body going to do? Well, they're old. It doesn't matter. They're expendable. No, they're not. We have to find a way to include them in the corporate act of our worship.
Oh my goodness. Go back to even the reasoning that Pharaoh gave, that he first tried to overtake Israel and oppress them, is basically, if they find out who they really are and put their heads together, they could easily overtake us. Uh-huh. So before they get the opportunity to do that, we're going to overtake them. In other words, we're going to isolate them from one another, keep them distracted so they don't have a focus on who they are and who their God is. And that way we can rule them. Because if they come back to if they have the time to pursue him, then they're going to find out who he is and who they are.
Right.
And he didn't want that. Makes me think really quick here. Proverbs 18:1-2 says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. So the idea here is that the way of the world is trying to keep us isolated from one another, when Yahweh continually tells us to be part of a group of people called Israel. Our identity as a child of God individually, but collectively as people of Yahweh.
Wow.
Well, that kind of puts us at our time, Barry. So
yes, it does.
So, guys, we love to hear from you. And if you have any feedback for us, your thoughts or things you'd like to hear on here, please contact us at reunionroadmap@bneyosefna.com. Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
And now from Will Spires, Don't Stop the Rain. This and other of his music videos are available on his YouTube channel, and check out his website, willspires.com.
Just how very little we're touching the ground. So slow down. I don't want you to be shaking to the shoulders. Yeah, don't you forget what he told you. Yeah, my peace I leave with you, my grace sufficient too. I'm gonna rain on you. Yeah, if you allow me to, I'm gonna rain in you. So slow down, dwell on how I am raining inside of you. All these emotions reveal my behavior, what I'd hidden in my heart all alone. Now I'm ashamed for this way I've been driving. God, let me get over just so we can talk. Lord, where is your kingdom? I got in the way when I examine my thinking. Much of mine's to blame, but your words bringing healing. What we choose is what we become. Lord, don't stop your rain, make me clean. Every thought you will redeem between the shoulders. Yeah, he said believe what he told you. Yeah, I keep you in perfect peace. Your mind is stayed on me. I'm gonna rain on you. Yeah, so what is meant to be? Follow thou me, and I will reign in you. inside of you.
Well, that was once again our friend Will Spires, Don't Stop the Rain. Before that, we heard Barry and David with their midrash, We Will All Worship. And before that, the music of Teshuvah, Coastlands. Now, what's interesting, as Stefania and I were remarking, Teshuvah and Will, by the way, they're all singing scripture. They're singing out the praises of our God based on the promises of our God in his holy word. And while we have seen some of his promises fulfilled in our own lives, we take by faith the word that has been given and handed down through the scriptures of what he did for our fathers and mothers in the faith, going back to the beginning. And now we look forward to his completion of the promises in our day and afterwards. Stefania, this is a thing that Barry and David have been talking about as we will all worship. Well, yeah, the ultimate goal is being around the throne of our Creator and Redeemer and worshiping him, worshiping the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the earth, who redeemed us and has remade us in his image. Can you draw any connections with what we are beginning to hear from Mark Randall with his life story and how all this is being walked out?
Yeah, I can see the midrash was on we will worship, and he had to come to that point, came to in his life about we will worship and being sort of a slave to his circumstances, I would say, and that eventually he gets to the point where he rises above being a slave to his circumstances and decides that he's going to worship. Similar to what they were talking about in the Midrash, about we have to get to the point where we have to rise above and our circumstances, and said we will worship. We're going to worship, and all our people will worship. Both our sons and our daughters will worship.
Now, we haven't gotten to that point yet in Mark's story, but we will. Right now, you are seeing as he's descending further into the darkness of the pit, but his story, we can assure you, is one of the redemption. He does see the light. It does come to a good end.
Yes.
And what we see in this individual story, multiplied on a national scale, as Teshuvah is singing about and as Barry and David are talking about, this is what we're looking forward to. When God says that he is going to make a people for himself out of every tribe, tongue, and nation, and when he says he is doing this through Israel, his firstborn, well, we should take him at his word.
Yes.
And this is a reason why we're going to be worshiping him as a people. We still don't see clearly how this is going to work out. But the fact that we have testimonies like Mark's and like many others of how this has worked out in individuals should give us a glimpse of what God is going to do on a much larger scale when he has his people fully redeemed and renewed and gathered to himself. With that in mind, I think we should bring an end to this show because we're out of time. But before we leave, and folks, if you have enjoyed the Reunion Roadmap podcasts, do check out our B'nai Yosef North America website, BNEYYOSEFNA.com. And also, if you have been blessed, think about pressing that donate button and giving as you are led. So on behalf of Stefania Pappas, David Jones, and Barry Phillips, this is Al McCarn. Shavua Tov.
Thank you for joining us on the Reunion Roadmap, a production of B'nai Yosef North America. Please come back next week for another visit with the people of the emerging house of Joseph here in North America.